country. And average age of the crew, and I generally like to compute things, but it was 21 and a half. And the youngest were 18, a couple of gunners 18 and 19, and radar was 18. But you develop this faith in working together on that. And I just think that's sort of magic. And to me, it was like a Americana painting, you know. Mm-hmm. And you trusted each other implicitly. You had to, and you performed. You never let any part of the crew down. And those were great days. And then finally, we did complete what could be called the operational training. And we were then sent up to Lincoln, Nebraska. We were on a hold pattern up there until planes became available. I don't know if we were up there a month or 6 weeks, you know, but we did exciting things like going to the top of the state building, I think, in Lincoln. That's pretty big, you know, for a bunch of farm boys. But we do things like that, and you did a lot of those things together. Now, there was a distinction, you know, between officers and men from a living quarters and everything, but I think those things are all overcome by when you are together at the plane. And I must say I was very fortunate to be on the Rover Boys Express, and I still feel bad, and I still think of them, that all of them didn't come home, you know, later on. So then we were called from Lincoln, and I think this is the way it happened. You're more excited about other things. We went to Harrington, Kansas, and I remember it's Herington.
That's correct.
And I see it misspelled all the time, and I say those
With
guys.
2 R's.
Yeah, I said they didn't pay any attention to the signs coming in now entering Harrington. But we stayed there, and it wasn't too long a time. And one day we went down to the operational shed, you know, and nothing really fancy. But that's okay. The excitement was in living and getting ready to go to combat. And we weren't even smart enough to have maybe an element of fear. And but anyhow, one day we were down there. They said, "There it is. There's your plane." And can you imagine? This was December of 1944, early December, and they say, "There's your plane." Now, we had some hours, obviously, in a B-29 when we were at Smoky Hill. And not a lot, because we didn't have that many. We had B-17 time and all of that kind of stuff, and some ground training, obviously. But here, that's your plane out there. And man, that's the biggest Christmas present we ever had, and it was assembled. I still hate where, you know, toys must be assembled. That thing was ready.
Ready
so
to go.
We went out there, all 11 of us, you know, and we clambered over it and inside it, and whew. Then after that, we had to do, you know, certain basics on engine flights and checks and things like that. And I always remember, as a navigator, that we had to swing the compass, which really meant tests for the correctness of the compass. And we did that over the section lines in Kansas. Now, you see how smart those farmers were, whoever they were. Their lines were so aligned to north and south that we could swing over there and at low altitude, you know, tell the captain, the pilot, "Now keep it right on this course, no variance." And then we were doing compass readings. So you may have a plus, you know, to make. And you're doing that by the farm fields down below on this high-tech plane. And I was always impressed, and even today as I fly across the country, I look down and see the section lines, and I said, one time when I was young, man, we swung that, and then if some passenger looks like he's fairly alert, I'll say, "I want to tell you about those section lines down there." And the guy probably says, "What the hell, I don't want to hear about those." But I want to tell him about how important those lines were. So we did that, and we did it, and then said, "Okay, you're ready to go," and we waited a few more days. I don't have the precise number of days. They were pretty exciting. And then one day we were told, you know, tomorrow you're going to leave, and they gave us a brown envelope, you know, just like in those movies you see today. Given to you, and you gather around. And our first stop was from Harrington, Kansas, alone. And that was one of the important factors. That's just learning of accepting responsibility. And you're going to fly to Matherfield, California, which is near Sacramento, about 100 miles in from San Francisco. And here we are, you know, we're taking off and we're flying out there. You know, we'd never been, you know, over the Rockies or anything like that. And we were pretty domestic. We probably got as far as Garden City or something. And while we were in training here, I do remember things, and I'll probably be thrown in jail for this. No, it isn't that bad. I think it's youth at its best. We used to go to bombing practice ranges, and they were called Wabansie Range and Potawatomi. And somehow when you get used to going there, whether it's daytime especially, and you're out there dropping bombs and doing a good job. As I said, we used to bet quarters on who could get, I could beat our bombardier, and you know, but it was that spirit of competing for a good reason. And I remember, I must have been on, we were getting ready to go overseas, really. And so I said, you know what we ought to do? We ought to save one bomb today, and when we're heading back to base, that lake that we cross over, I think I could locate it on a map now, and say, you know, and through the bomb site, you could, you know, see things on the lake and boats and things like that. And I said, why don't we save one bomb? Now, these were only 100-pound bombs, and had sand in them and an explosive charge so you could see where you hit. Let's save one, and we'll drop it down there in the lake. And occasionally you might see a boat fishing here and one down in this cove and that. And we were so sure that we could drop that thing offset, say from after we found a boat, and we wanted to get in, if we had a big side wind or something, we wanted to have the wind where we're going directly into it so we could preset all the gears on the bomb site. And with that, I'd have bet we could be within 200 feet. And so we picked out this boat out in the middle, you know, and we did the trial run over, and then went back on a reciprocal and then said, okay, we're ready. We got this thing all locked in. And we dropped that bomb. And all I can think of in the years since, and now as you get older, you think, you know, retired people down there fishing. I don't know if there was one person or two people on the boat, but I quite often think of, wonder what they thought, because a bomb, you know, 100 pound, makes a lot of whistling noise coming down. Mm-hmm. And here's a guy out there probably flicking his, you know, spin outfit out there, and our bomb did hit offset from the boat, I would imagine 200 feet. And we were sent out of town shortly after that, you know, not because of that, but I was trying to leave that behind. I had told that once before in recent years, so if a sheriff shows up tomorrow, those guys who were probably fishing, I think they probably have now gone west, as we say.
Yeah.
But anyhow, other than that, that's not what we were paid to do.
Well, Harrington, you talked about Harrington, and I'm going to throw a little side note in there. I know Harrington very well.
Do you?
Yeah, I railroaded out of Harrington. I was a locomotive engineer on the Rock Island Railroad.
On the Rock Island? Mm-hmm. And you know I was with the Rock Island, too.
No.
Well, I didn't want to tell you. Went bankrupt. And,
in 1980?
Yeah.
Yeah. Where were you at? I was in Harrington.
Well, I wasn't. I bailed out earlier than that because I knew we were going downhill. We had the Rock Island Rockets. Remember that? Mm-hmm. I think the hot consist train with the perishables was 92 or something.
93.
93?
94. 93 and 94.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, anyhow, too bad we didn't know each other then.
When were you with the Rock Island?
Oh, Jiminy. Well, I was with them before I went in service, and I went into service, say, the end of 42, and then I was gone 4 years, and then I came back with them, and I came out of the hospital, and, you know, in those days, the doctors were not familiar with things like we now have a name for everything, post-stress syndrome, you know. Mm-hmm. And all I knew was I was nervous and shaky. But finally, after all the hospital time and everything, they said maybe it'd be the best cure, they didn't use that term, might be most advantageous, to go back to the job. Did you like your job? What did you do? I was a clerk. I was a clerk with the Rock Island Railroad, the route of the Rockets. And they said, maybe if you went back there, and it might be the thing to do. So I did, you know, and I showed up, and what I'm going to say I'm kidding about, but it's sort of my look back. I went to work back in the terminal in Cincinnati, and that's where I lived, and that's where I worked when I left with the Rock Island. Went in, took the elevator to the 7th floor. We were still there. And walked in, we had double doors, because sometimes passengers came in to buy tickets. And there was my desk. I think it had been dusted, but not frequently.